The call came in at 11:47 p.m. Officer Clark on duty recorded a report of shots fired at 18 Magnolia Street, apartment 2. Detective Lequan Gamble was just about to head home when his radio crackled to life. Gamble, we have a shooting in a residential building on the southeast outskirts. Possible attempted murder. The victim is alive but in critical condition. The dispatcher's voice sounded tense. Gamble sighed, threw on his jacket, and headed for his beat-up Chevrolet. The night air in Baton Rouge was thick and humid. Rain was starting to fall, small drops hitting the windshield and blurring the neon lights of roadside diners and gas stations. Arriving at the scene 23 minutes later, Gamble saw 2 police cars with flashing lights and an ambulance. Patrol officers had already cordoned off the perimeter with yellow tape. Several curious neighbors had gathered at a distance, despite the late hour. "What do we have here?" Gamble asked, showing his badge to the officer on duty at the entrance. "The victim is a woman in her mid-20s with a gunshot wound to the chest. The medics are preparing her for transport. The shooter fled the scene. According to preliminary information, it was her fiancé." Gamble nodded and entered the 2-story brick building. Climbing the creaky stairs to the second floor, he found himself in a small apartment. Paramedics were just carrying out the stretcher with the victim. "Wait!" Gamble called out to them. "Is she conscious? Can she talk?" One of the paramedics shook his head. "No, she's lost a lot of blood. Her pulse is weak. We need to get her to the hospital immediately." Gamble glanced at the victim. She was a young black woman with neat braids, her face pale, her eyes closed. A dark red stain was spreading across her white blouse. He nodded to the medics, and they continued on their way. The apartment was typical of a young couple with modest means. The living room was combined with the kitchen, and there was 1 bedroom and a bathroom. In the center of the living room was a small sofa and a coffee table with the remains of dinner, 2 glasses of dark red wine, and 1 bottle. Forensic scientist Rodney was already at work, collecting samples and photographing the crime scene. "The shot was fired in the bedroom," he said without looking up from his work. "Judging by the evidence, it was a .22 caliber pistol. The shell casing was found under the bed." Gamble looked around the bedroom. Clothes were scattered everywhere, the sheets were crumpled, and there were drops of blood on the floor in bed. "There was obviously a struggle here," he muttered. "Detective, take a look at this." Rodney pointed to a wine bottle on the table. "Something's not right here. See the white residue at the bottom?" Gamble put on gloves and examined the bottle closely. "It could be some kind of drug. Send it for analysis first." He continued his search of the apartment. Several photographs were attached to the refrigerator with magnets. In them, Gamble saw the victim in the company of a tall, muscular man with a crew cut. The couple looked happy. A picnic by the lake, a trip to an amusement park, dinner at a restaurant. "We need to find out who this guy is," Gamble said to the patrolman, taking notes. "Presumably, this is our shooter." At that moment, loud voices came from the hallway. A woman's scream drowned out the officer's pleas. "Let me in! It's my sister! Where is she? What's wrong with her?" Gamble stepped into the hallway and saw a young woman trying to break into the apartment. "Ma'am, calm down. I'm Detective Lequan Gamble. What's your name?" "Noxia Gentry. My neighbors called and said there was a shooting at Chanel's apartment. Where is she? Is she alive?" "Miss Gentry, your sister has just been taken to the hospital. She's wounded, but she's alive. Let's go inside and talk." Noxia looked like the victim, but she was younger and shorter. Her eyes were red from crying and her hands were shaking. "That's Daquan, right? He's the one who shot her?" she asked as soon as they entered the apartment. "We can't say for sure yet. Do you know a man named Daquan?" "Daquan Towers, Chanel's fiancé. I knew this would happen. I knew it." She sank onto the sofa, covering her face with her hands. "Why do you say that, Miss Gentry? Were they having problems in their relationship?" Noxia looked up at him, her eyes filled with tears and anger. "Problems? No. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. He thought he was dating a normal girl. But Chanel, she had a secret." "What secret?" Gamble felt he was getting closer to the heart of the matter. Noxia took a deep breath, as if gathering her strength. "Chanel is a transgender woman. She was born as Sean. She had surgery 3 years ago. I told her she should tell Daquan right away, but she was afraid of his reaction. She said that after the wedding, Gamble nodded, beginning to understand the picture. He made a note in his notebook. What can you tell me about Dequan Towers? He's a gamekeeper at Tuna Hills Reserve. They met about a year ago when Chanel went there with friends for a picnic. He seemed like a decent guy. Old-fashioned, you know? The kind who opens doors for women and gives them flowers. Chanel liked that. Is he aggressive? Prone to violence? No. I mean, I don't know. He sometimes told stories about hunting and showed photos of dead animals. Chanel didn't like it, but she put up with it. She said it was his job. Does he have any weapons? Yes, of course. He's a gamekeeper. He has a license for a gun, which he carries at work to protect himself from wild animals. Gamble made another note. He needed to put out an APB for Towers immediately. Do you know where he might be now? Noxia shook her head. I have no idea. Maybe he went to the reserve? There are some guardhouses there, and he sometimes stayed there overnight when he worked the night shift. At that moment, one of the officers approached Gamble. Detective, the neighbors want to give a statement. They say they heard an argument before the shot. I'll be right there. Miss Gentry, stay here. I'll need to ask you a few more questions. Gamble stepped into the hallway, where an elderly woman in a dressing gown with curlers in her hair was waiting for him. Mrs. Watson. Gladys Watson. I live in the apartment across the hall. I couldn't help but hear what was going on. Tell me exactly what you heard, Mrs. Watson. Well, at first it was quiet. I was watching my show like usual. Then, around 11 o'clock, I heard screaming. A man's voice, very angry. Something like, "You cheated on me. What is that? What the hell is that?" Then a woman's voice pleading, "Dequan, please, I can explain, please." Then there was a loud crash like something fell, and then a gunshot. Are you sure it was a gunshot? Detective, I grew up in New Orleans. I know what a gunshot sounds like. After that, I immediately called 911. Did you see anyone leaving the apartment after the gunshot? Yes, a man, tall, wearing dark clothes. He literally flew out of the apartment and ran down the stairs. I didn't see his face, but it was the same guy who lives with Chanel. Dequan, I think. Thank you, Mrs. Watson. Your information is very valuable to us. The officer will take your statement. Gamble returned to the apartment. Rodney was already packing the wine bottle into an evidence bag. I'll send this to the lab right away, said the forensic scientist. If there really was a sleeping pill or something like that, we'll know by morning. Gamble nodded and returned to Noxia, who was nervously rummaging through the things on the coffee table. Miss Gentry, you said that Chanel wanted to wait until the wedding. What exactly did she mean? Noxia sighed. She told Dequan that she wanted to save herself for the wedding, as in no sex. He kind of respected her decision, even though he wasn't happy about it. They'd been engaged for 3 months. And the wedding? It was supposed to be in 2 weeks. A small ceremony in the city park. Chanel was going to tell him the truth the day before the ceremony. I told her it was crazy, but she was afraid she'd lose him. Gamble looked around and noticed a phone on the bedside table. He put on a new pair of gloves and picked up the device. Does this phone belong to your sister? Noxia nodded. Yes, it's Chanel's phone. Gamble turned on the screen. The phone wasn't locked. The last messages were from Dequan, sent earlier that day. Can't wait for our special night. Bought your favorite wine. Love you, baby. See you soon. Gamble scrolled further and found Chanel's correspondence with a contact labeled Noxia 3. He's pushing for intimacy. Says he can't wait any longer. I agreed to tonight. What should I do? You have to tell him the truth before things go too far. I can't. I love him. I'll think of something. The last message was sent at 6 p.m. Is this your sister's message? Gamble asked, showing Noxia's phone. She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes again. I warned her. She thought she could get out of it somehow. Maybe pretend to be sick or something. But Dequan was insistent. He wanted intimacy before the wedding. And tonight was the night, Gamble said thoughtfully. And the bottle of wine was his gift. Noxia suddenly turned pale. Do you think he put something in the wine to relax her? Possibly. We'll check the bottle for foreign substances. Gamble continued examining the phone. The gallery was full of selfies of the couple, against the backdrop of the Mississippi and restaurants in the park. In all the photos, they looked happy. Nothing foreshadowed the tragedy. In Chanel's contacts, He found Daquan Towers' number and wrote it down in his notebook. Then he put the phone back where he found it. The text would take it as evidence. "Miss Gentry, can you give us a photo of Daquan Towers? We need to put him on the lookout." Noxia took out her phone and showed him a group photo of Daquan, a tall, muscular man with a crew cut and a serious expression. "That's him, to the left of Chanel." Gamble took a photo of the image on his phone and sent it to the dispatcher with instructions to immediately put Towers on the wanted list as armed and dangerous. "Detective," Noxia said suddenly, "I have to go to the hospital. Chanel needs me." "Of course," Gamble replied. "Officer Jenkins will take you there. But before you go, tell me if Daquan has any friends or relatives he could turn to for help." Noxia thought for a moment. "He has a friend, Travan. They work together at the nature reserve. They're very close. Daquan called him his brother. I don't remember his last name, but they spent all their time together." Gamble wrote down the name, Travan, gamekeeper at Tuna Hills Nature Reserve. It was a good lead. "Thank you, Miss Gentry. The officer will escort you to the hospital. We'll keep you updated on the investigation." As Noxia left with the officer, Gamble took another careful look around the apartment. Everything pointed to his initial theory being correct. Daquan Towers had invited his fiancée out for a special evening, possibly spiked her wine to get her to agree to intimacy, and when he discovered she was a transgender woman, he shot her with his service weapon and fled. Now the main task was to find Towers before he fled the state, or worse, tried to finish what he had started. Lequan Gamble arrived at the Tunica Hills Preserve office at exactly 8 o'clock in the morning. The small wooden building with a green roof was located on the edge of a forest 30 miles from Baton Rouge. Several service pickup trucks and SUVs with Louisiana Department of Natural Resources insignia were parked nearby. Gamble parked nearby and went inside. The room smelled of wood and coffee. A woman in her mid-40s sat behind the reception desk, looking through some papers. "Good morning, ma'am. Detective Lequan Gamble, Baton Rouge Police Department," he said, showing his badge. "I need to speak with the chief of this station." The woman nodded and pointed to a door at the back of the room. "Randall Bates. He's already here." The station chief was a stocky man with a graying beard and a sharp gaze. He stood up to shake Gamble's hand. "How can I help you, detective?" "I'm investigating an attempted murder. The suspect is one of your employees, Daquan Towers." Bates frowned. "Daquan? That can't be. He's one of our best officers." "Nevertheless, last night he shot his fiancée. She's in critical condition at the hospital. I need information on Towers, how long he's been with the department, his performance record, access to weapons." Bates sank heavily into his chair and gestured for Gamble to sit down opposite him. "Daquan has been with us for about 5 years. He joined us straight out of college. He's responsible, punctual, and knows his job well. No complaints." "What about his personality? Is he quick-tempered or aggressive?" "No, quite the opposite. Calm, even-tempered. Although," Bates paused, "Daquan is quite conservative in his views. Old-fashioned, I would say. Some of the new guys even tease him about it." "Old-fashioned in what way?" "Well, he believes in traditional values. Family, respect for his elders, church on Sundays. He doesn't drink or smoke. As far as I know, he even wanted to wait until marriage before, well, you know." Bates coughed awkwardly. "At least that's what the guys said. I don't get involved in my employees' personal lives." Gamble made a note in his notebook. "What about weapons?" "Like all our gamekeepers, Daquan has a service pistol, a Glock 19, but he rarely carries it, preferring his personal weapon, a Smith & Wesson .38 revolver. He has a permit." "Does he have the revolver with him?" "He should. He always carries it when he's on duty." "When was the last time you saw Towers?" "The day before yesterday. He had yesterday off." Gamble nodded and asked the main question. "Any idea where he might be hiding?" Bates thought for a moment. "There are several gamekeepers' huts in the reserve for night duty. Daquan often stayed in the one on the eastern section, 20 miles from here, deep in the woods. It's called Pine Creek. It has everything you need to live off the grid, a generator, food supplies, even satellite communications." "I need to get there." "I wouldn't recommend it without a guide. The road is rough, especially after yesterday's rain, and Daquan, if he's there, knows that area like the back of his hand." "Can you recommend someone?" Travis Barkley, our senior gamekeeper. He's Deck One's best friend, but he also respects the law. If you explain the situation, he'll help you. Is he there now? He should be. He's on his morning rounds and will be back in an hour or so. Gamble thanked his boss and went outside. He needed time to organize a capture team. He called the station and requested backup. 4 officers with equipment for a raid in a wooded area. While waiting for Trayvon Barkley to return, the detective decided to visit the victim at the hospital. Chanel Devereaux had been taken to Baton Rouge General Hospital with a gunshot wound to the chest. According to the officer on duty, she had undergone emergency surgery and was in intensive care. 40 minutes later, Gamble was at the hospital. He found Noxia Gentry in the hallway near the intensive care unit. She looked exhausted, her eyes swollen from crying. "How is she?" the detective asked. "The doctors say she's out of danger. The bullet passed within inches of her heart. Chanel woke up an hour ago. She's weak but conscious. I need to talk to her." Noxie shook her head. "She can barely speak. The doctors have forbidden us to upset her. Miss Gentry, this is a case of attempted murder. Dequan Towers is still at large and armed. The sooner we find him, the safer everyone will be, including your sister." After some hesitation, Noxia relented. They entered the room together. Chanel lay on a hospital bed, hooked up to several monitors. Her chest was bandaged, her face pale, her breathing labored. She turned her head slightly when they entered. "Chanel, this is Detective Gamble," Noxia said quietly. "He's investigating your case." Gamble approached the bed cautiously. "Miss Devereaux, I understand that this is difficult for you, but I need to ask you a few questions. Are you able to speak?" Chanel nodded weakly. "Was that Dequan Towers? Did he shoot you?" "Yes." Her voice was barely audible. "Can you tell me what happened?" Chanel closed her eyes as if gathering her strength. "He invited me to dinner. He said he couldn't wait any longer for the wedding. I was afraid to refuse. He brought wine." "Did he put something in the wine?" "I don't know. I drank a glass and felt weak. He took me to the bedroom, started undressing me." Chanel fell silent, tears rolling down her cheeks. Noxia squeezed her hand. "When he realized—" Chanel struggled to find the words. "That I was a transgender woman, he flew into a rage. He shouted that I had deceived him, that I was a monster. I tried to explain, but he wouldn't listen. He took a gun out of his jacket. I begged him." Her voice faltered, and she fell silent. Gamble waited patiently. "He shot me, almost point blank. Then he ran away. I thought I was going to die. All I remember is calling Noxie, then darkness." "Do you know where he might have gone?" "To Trayvon's, probably, or to the cabin in the woods. He often said that was his refuge from the world." Gamble nodded, taking notes. "Tell me about your relationship. How did you meet?" Chanel closed her eyes, remembering. "A year ago, at the nature reserve. I was there with friends on a picnic. He was giving a tour. He was so gallant, so attentive. He asked for my phone number. We started dating." "Did you decide right away to hide from him that you were a transgender woman?" Chanel shook her head. "I wanted to tell him, but I was afraid of his reaction. He's so conservative. He said he was proud that I was a real woman, not like these modern ones. I kept putting off the conversation, thinking that if he really loved me, he would accept the truth." "Why did you insist on not being intimate before marriage?" "It was the only way to hide the truth. I said I had strict religious beliefs. He respected that. At least I thought he did." "Until last night, there was no intimacy between you?" "No." Chanel looked away. "There were other forms of intimacy. But I always found a way to avoid full disclosure." Gamble nodded understandingly. "You were going to marry him without telling him the truth?" "No. I planned to tell him the day before the wedding. I hoped that by then his feelings would be strong enough." Chanel coughed, and Noxia brought a glass of water to her lips. "Does he know you survived?" Gamble asked. "I don't know. He ran out right after the shot. Is there a chance he'll come back to finish what he started?" Chanel paled even more. "I don't know, but he was so angry. I've never seen him like that before." Gamble turned to Noxia. "I'll arrange for round-the-clock security for the room. No one except medical personnel and you will be allowed in." Noxia nodded gratefully. One more question, Miss Devereaux. What can you tell me about Daquan's friend, Trevon Barkley? Trevon. They're like brothers. They work together, they hang out together. Daquan tells him everything. Did he know about your relationship? Yes, of course. We had dinner together a few times. He seemed like a nice guy, though a little wary. Do you think Daquan might have turned to him for help? Possibly. Or Trayvon might know where to find him. Gamble thanked Chanel and wished her a speedy recovery. Leaving the room, he arranged for security and immediately headed back to the reserve. Trayvon Barkley was a tall, muscular man with dreadlocks tied back in a ponytail. His face was wary when Gamble introduced himself and explained the purpose of his visit. Daquan, no way. There must be some mistake. Trevon shook his head. I'm afraid not. We have witness statements and the victim's own testimony. Daquan Towers shot his fiancée and fled. We need to find him as soon as possible. Trevon ran his hand over his face as if trying to comprehend what he had heard. He called me late last night. He was very upset and talking incoherently. All I could understand was that something bad had happened to Chanel. I asked if he needed help, but he refused and hung up. Do you know where he might be now? Trayvon hesitated. He was clearly torn between his loyalty to his friend and his duty to the law. Mr. Barkley, Daquan is armed and dangerous. He has already tried to kill someone. If we don't find him, someone else could get hurt, maybe even him. That seemed to convince Trayvon. There's a cabin on the eastern edge of the reserve called Pine Creek. Daquan hangs out there a lot. If he wanted to hide, that's probably where he'd go. Can you take us there? Yes, but we'll need an off-road vehicle. The road is washed out after the rain. While the arrest operation was being prepared, Gamble decided to check Daquan's phone. The police had a warrant to access his phone records and messages. A police technician provided him with a printout of the messages between Daquan and Trevon from the last month. Among the usual exchange of work information and friendly banter, Gamble found several interesting messages. 3 weeks ago, Daquan wrote, "Bro, I'm going crazy. Chanel is standing firm. No sex before marriage. We've been together for a year, and she's still saying no." Trayvon replied, "Respect her decision, bro. Decent girls are rare these days." 2 weeks ago, "I can't do this anymore. Either we finally get together for real or there's no wedding." That's harsh, bro, but maybe you should compromise. It's not that long until the wedding. A week ago, "It's decided. On Friday, I'm going to make Chanel a real woman whether she wants to or not. I bought her favorite wine and something else. She'll have a glass and she'll be as smooth as silk. Dude, this is beyond the pale. Don't do anything stupid. We're engaged. It's my right as a man." The last message was sent last night, around midnight. "She cheated on me. All this time. She's not a woman. She's a damn man. I'm furious. I think I've messed up." There was no reply to this message from Trevon. Gamble showed the printout to Trevon as they drove to the cabin accompanied by 4 armed officers. "What do you think?" asked the detective, pointing to the messages. Trey looked confused. I could tell he was upset about not being intimate, but I didn't think he would actually put something in the wine. Daquan sometimes brags to seem cooler. As for the last message, I was in shock. I didn't know what to say. I tried calling him back, but he didn't answer. "Did you know that Chanel was a transgender woman?" "No, I swear. It was as much of a surprise to me as it was to him." The road was becoming increasingly difficult to navigate. They were deepening into the forest on a muddy track that could hardly be called a road. Pine and cypress trees towered overhead, and the morning light filtered through, creating a bizarre play of shadows. "About a mile to go," Trevon said. "The cabin is behind that hill." Gamble signaled to stop. "We'll go on foot from here. We can't let him hear the engine." They left the cars and moved through the forest, trying not to make any noise. The officers spread out, surrounding the cabin in a semicircle. Gamble took up a position on a small hill with his binoculars. The Pine Creek cabin was a sturdy log house with a porch and a small chimney from which a wisp of smoke was rising. A battered pickup truck was parked nearby, the same one registered to Daquan Towers. "He's there," Gamble whispered to Trayvon. "See the smoke coming from the chimney?" Trayvon nodded. "What now?" "We'll surround the cabin and ask him to surrender. If he refuses, we'll act according to the situation." Gamble radioed the officers and gave the signal to begin the operation. They silently took up positions around the shack, weapons at the ready. "Dequan Towers!" Gamble shouted through a megaphone. "This is the Baton Rouge Police Department. You are surrounded. Come out with your hands up!" There was silence. A few seconds later, the door of the shack slowly opened, and Dequan stepped out onto the porch with his hands up. His face was haggard, his eyes red, as if he hadn't slept all night. "I give up," he said quietly. "I knew you were coming." Gamble signaled to the officers, who quickly approached Dequan, pinned him to the ground, and handcuffed him. The detective searched him himself and found a Smith & Wesson revolver in the suspect's belt. "Dequan Towers, you are under arrest on suspicion of the attempted murder of Chanel Devereaux. You have the right to remain silent." While Gamble read Dequan his rights, Trevon looked at his friend with an expression of pain and disappointment on his face. Dequan avoided his gaze. As the suspect was led to the car, Gamble asked, "Why, Towers, why did you shoot her?" Dequan looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and pain. "She lied to me. She lied to me for a year. I loved her. I wanted to marry her. And she turned out to be—" He didn't finish his sentence. "That doesn't justify attempted murder," Gamble said harshly. "I didn't mean to shoot her. I was in shock, enraged. I had the gun with me because I had just gotten off duty. I don't even remember pulling the trigger." He was put in a police car. Trayvon approached Gamble. "Detective, how's Chanel? Is she going to live?" "Yes, the doctors say she's out of danger. She was lucky. The bullet missed her heart by inches." Trayvon shook his head. "What a tragedy. And all because of what? Because of some old-fashioned prejudice?" Gamble didn't answer. He thought about the correspondence, about Dequan's words about it being his right as a man, about the sleeping pills in the wine. The story wasn't just about Dequan learning the truth about Chanel, but about his attempt to control the situation, about his disrespect for her choice. The police convoy headed back to the city. Gamble had a long interrogation and paperwork ahead of him, but the important thing had been done. The suspect in the attempted murder had been arrested, and the victim was safe and on the road to recovery. Dequan Towers sat in the interrogation room at the Baton Rouge police station, staring at the steel surface of the table. His wrists were handcuffed, his face gaunt, his eyes frozen in an expression of devastation. Across from him sat Detective Lequan Gamble, with an open folder containing photos from the crime scene and Chanel's medical report. "Mr. Towers, we found an empty sleeping pill bottle in your apartment," Gamble began, placing the plastic bag containing the evidence on the table. "Analysis of the wine from the bottle showed the presence of an active ingredient. You spiked Chanel's wine with sleeping pills. This was a deliberate act." Dequan looked up, his lips trembling. "I just wanted her to relax. Not to pass out, just to stop being afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Closeness. She always avoided real closeness. She said she wanted to wait until we were married. I respected that for a whole year, but then I began to suspect that it wasn't her religious beliefs." "And what did you suspect?" Dequan looked away. "I don't know. Maybe some kind of trauma from her past, or a physical flaw she was ashamed of. I thought if we had some wine, if she relaxed a little with a sleeping pill, she would overcome her fear." "Don't you think that slipping someone a sleeping pill without their knowledge is a crime?" "I didn't think of it that way. I just wanted to help her. And myself. I loved her. Wanted to be with her. Really." Gamble made a note in his notebook. "Tell me about that evening. From the beginning." Dequan took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. "I invited her to dinner, at our place. I cooked her favorite dishes and bought some good wine. She seemed tense but happy. We had dinner, talked about the wedding, about our future. Then I opened the wine. When she turned away, I added the crushed pill to her glass." He paused, remembering. "We drank. 15 minutes later, she started to relax. She said she felt light and warm. I kissed her, and she kissed me back. Everything was going well. I took her to the bedroom." Gamble watched his face change as he delved deeper into his memories. "I started to undress her. She didn't resist, just whispered that she loved me. I was in seventh heaven. Then, when I took off her underwear..." Daquan's face contorted with pain and anger. I saw that Chanel was a man with male genitals. I couldn't believe my eyes. I thought it was a nightmare, or that the wine had affected me strangely, but it was reality. What did you feel at that moment? Shock, complete incomprehension, then anger. So strong that my vision went dark. I yelled at her, demanded an explanation. She cried, tried to say something about being born in the wrong body, that she had had breast correction surgery, but hadn't yet completed the full transformation. I couldn't hear it. When did you get the gun? It was in my jacket, hanging on a chair next to the bed. I always carry it with me, especially after night shifts at the reserve. I grabbed the gun. I don't remember what I was thinking at that moment. I just wanted it all to stop, for this nightmare to end. Do you remember the moment you fired? Daquan closed his eyes, his hands trembling. Vaguely. I remember Chanel screaming when she saw the gun. I remember her reaching out her hands, begging me to put it down. And then there was a bang, and blood. Lots of blood. What did you do after the shot? I panicked. I realized what I had done. I dropped the gun, grabbed my jacket, and ran out of the apartment. I got in my car and drove to the nature reserve, to the cabin. It's the only place where I feel safe. On the way, you wrote a message to Trayvon? Yes. I was in shock. I didn't know what I was writing. Gamble nodded and flipped through a few pages in his folder. In your previous messages, you wrote that you were going to make Chanel a real woman. What did you mean by that? Daquan looked embarrassed. It was just bravado. Talk between men. I didn't mean any harm. But you planned to slip her sleeping pills beforehand. You bought them 3 days before the incident. Yes, I'm not proud of it, but I wasn't going to rape her or anything like that. I just wanted her to relax. If she had said no, I would have stopped. Even under the influence of sleeping pills, her consent would not have been valid, Mr. Towers. Daquan lowered his head. I didn't think about it that way. How did you know that Chanel survived? I didn't know. Or rather, I guessed. If she had died, you would have charged me with murder, not attempted murder. Gamble gathered the documents back into the folder. Daquan Towers, you will be charged with attempted murder, unlawful use of a weapon, and use of substances without the consent of the victim. I recommend that you hire a lawyer. Daquan nodded without looking up. I deserve to be punished. I made a terrible mistake. As Daquan was led back to his cell, Gamble went to the adjacent interrogation room, where Trayvon Barkley was waiting. Mr. Barkley, I need to ask you a few questions about your relationship with Daquan Towers and what you knew about his plans. Trayvon looked tense but willing to cooperate. Daquan and I have been friends for 5 years. We work together at the nature reserve. He's always been a reliable guy, a little old-fashioned, but kind. When did you find out about his relationship with Chanel Devro? About a year ago. He was very excited after their first date. He said he had met a special woman. Did Daquan tell you about any problems in their relationship? Yes, in recent months he often complained that Chanel didn't want to be physically intimate. She said her religious beliefs prevented her from having sex before marriage. Daquan seemed to respect that, but he was becoming increasingly impatient. Did he tell you about his plans to slip sleeping pills into Chanel's wine? Travis grimaced. Yes, he did. About a week ago. I tried to talk him out of it. I told him it was wrong and possibly even illegal, but he dismissed me, saying it was his right as a man. Do you still have those messages? Yes, Trayvon said, pulling out his phone. Here, you can see for yourself. I told him it was crossing the line and asked him not to do anything stupid. Gamble looked through the messages, confirming Trayvon's words. Did you ever meet Chanel? A few times. We had dinner together, went bowling once. She seemed like a nice woman. I never would have thought she was... transgender? Yes, it was a complete surprise to me, just like it was to Daquan. How did you react when Daquan texted you last night about what happened? Trey rubbed his face with his hands. I was in shock. At first, I didn't even believe it. I tried to call him back, but he didn't answer. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't sure if he really shot her. I thought maybe he just got angry and left. Why didn't you call the police? I should have, I know. But I wasn't sure what really happened. And, to be honest, I didn't want to turn on a friend if he was just drunk and exaggerating. Gamble nodded understandingly. Mr. Barkley, at this point, we have no reason to charge you with anything, but I may need your testimony in court. Of course, I'll cooperate. Trayvon paused, then added, Detective, can I see Chanel? I want to make sure she's okay and… He hesitated. Show her our correspondence with Daquan, so she knows I tried to stop him. Gamble thought for a moment. That's an unusual request. Why is that important to you? Because I feel partly to blame. I could have tried harder to talk him out of it. I could have warned her. I just want her to know that not everyone is like Daquan, that I'm on her side. All right. I can arrange a meeting, but only in my presence and only if Miss Devereaux agrees. 3 days later, Gamble accompanied Trayvon to the hospital. Chanel's condition had improved significantly, and she had been moved from intensive care to a regular ward. Gamble had spoken to her beforehand and obtained her consent to meet with Trayvon. Chanel sat in bed, leaning on pillows. Her face was still pale, but her eyes were clear. Noxia sat next to her, holding her sister's hand. Hello, Miss Devereaux, Gamble began. How are you feeling? Better, thank you. The doctors say I'm on the mend. This is Trayvon Barkley, a friend of Daquan's. He wanted to talk to you. Chanel tensed, her fingers tightening around her sister's hand. Hello, Trayvon. Why are you here? Trayvon looked uncomfortable, shifting from one foot to the other. Chanel, I wanted to apologize for not warning you, for not stopping Daquan. I knew he was up to something bad, but I never thought it would go this far. You knew he was going to spike my drink? Yes, Trayvon said, lowering his head. He wrote to me about it. I tried to talk him out of it, told him it was wrong, but I wasn't persistent enough. He took out his phone. Detective Gamble, can I show Chanel our correspondence with Daquan, so she can see that I really was against it? Gamble nodded. Yes, I can confirm that in the messages, Mr. Barkley did indeed try to talk Daquan out of his plans. Trayvon handed the phone to Chanel. She read the messages silently, her face expressionless. Thanks for showing me, she finally said, returning the phone. I believe you tried to stop him. I didn't know you were a transgender woman, Trayvon said cautiously. But that doesn't matter. What Daquan did is unforgivable either way. Chanel looked at him in surprise. Really? Many people think otherwise. Many people think I was cheating on him, that I deserved it. That's not true, Trayvon said firmly. No one deserves violence, and I want you to know that I don't share Daquan's prejudices. To me, you are the woman you've always felt you were. Tears welled up in Chanel's eyes. Thank you, Trayvon. That means a lot to me. Gamble watched the conversation with interest. There was clearly a connection between these two people, a mutual understanding that was unusual in such a situation. A week later, a preliminary court hearing was held, at which Daquan Towers was formally charged. He pleaded guilty to attempted murder and agreed to cooperate with the justice system. He was facing trial and probably a long prison sentence. For Detective Lequan Gamble, the case was closed. All the evidence had been gathered, charges had been filed, and the criminal had been arrested. But something bothered him, a feeling of incompleteness. Exactly 1 year after those events, Gamble received an unexpected envelope. Inside was a wedding invitation for Chanel Devereaux and Trayvon Barkley. Attached to the invitation was a short note. Detective Gamble, you saved my life and helped me find new happiness. Without you, this wedding would never have happened. Please share this special day with us. Gamble smiled as he put the invitation away. In this strange world full of prejudice and cruelty, sometimes there were happy endings. At that moment, he thought of the words his old mentor had once said to him, "The truth can hurt, but it also heals." Chanel had paid a terrible price for her truth. But in the end, it was that truth that led her to a man who could accept her for who she was. Perhaps, Gamble mused, pulling a photo album of his long-departed wife from his desk drawer, that was the meaning of a detective's work, not only to punish the guilty, but to help people find the truth, their own truth.